Morena koutou, everyone. Welcome to the Finance and Performance Committee meeting today, being held here at Happy Aotearoa. I will open us with a here. Tū taua mai e rora, tū taua mai e rara, tū taua mai e roto, tū taua mai e waho. Kia tau a te mauri a tau, te mauri ora kia ka, te ka, katoa. Haumi e, hui e, tai e. Come forth from above, come forth from below, come forth from within, and from the environment, vitality and well-being for all, strength and dignity. Right, this morning I do have two apologies, Councillor Peter Johns and Councillor Sharon Watts. So we move those to Councillor Gilmore, second to Councillor Chase. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. There's nobody here for public forum. The notification of any items that are not listed on the agenda. And you can hear us okay online, Councillor Wallace and Councillor Sutherland?
All good, thanks.
Yeah, we're fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Could you speak loud though? That mic's not very good.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll remember Councillor John's words in my ear. Declarations of conflicts of interest in relation to today's meeting. Hearing none. Confirmation of the minutes. Can I have somebody move that the Finance and Performance Committee meeting held on the 22nd of May and the Extraordinary Finance and Performance Committee meeting held on the 11th of June and the Extraordinary Finance and Performance Committee meeting held on the 19th of June.
Happy to move.
Confirmed from correct. Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Peter Huber. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you, councillors. Is there anything in the right place? Right. Takes us through to page 41. Right, the first quarter performance report. So we have today with us Sarah that's going to run through that. So thank you, Sarah.
Morning, everyone. Your worship, councillors. My apologies. You have me talking most of the morning, so apologies in advance for that. Beth has very kindly prepared the first quarter performance report for us. I'll take it. Oh, excuse me. Sorry to interrupt. Could I ask, can Sarah be perhaps have a desk there so she's facing us like would normally do in the other chamber?
It's just that nobody can see her on screen. That's the only challenge. We can put it to the side a little bit. Would that help?
It's just angled about.
Yeah, just angled a little bit.
That's quite hard. Yeah, someone who's talking. Yeah, you look up into the camera.
I thought that the camera was centered, but actually when you look at the screen it looks fine.
Yeah, it does, yeah. Okay, take two. First quarter report. So I'm going to take you direct to page 43, which shows we were tracking for the first quarter at a high level overview, showing an unfavourable variance of 328,000. But the main factor to that is our subsidies. So we have subsidies that have been budgeted mainly in our Better Off funding, which you'll find when you go to the detailed part of the report that hasn't yet been received, but they're received as costs have been incurred, and we only claim for them periodically once we get to a threshold for a claim to be submitted. So nothing unforeseen, nothing sticking out in this first quarter from a finance perspective. I think I made the comment to Raj yesterday, it's first quarter, it's tracking pretty well. We're currently in the process of doing our annual plan budget, so these are all being factored in, and any sort of quirky things, nothing has come out from our work in that space, so I'm quite comfortable with where we're tracking. Beth has then on the next page got your detailed, she's got your, what is it called? The little tick box. Dashboard, thank you. I'm so sorry, what's this one? Beth's got your dashboard on there. There is a couple that we do have an exclamation mark around, which I will touch on. Waste management, so you'll see that the revenue is less than budget by 109,000, but there is a corresponding savings in the expenditure with showing a favourable variance of 220,000. So actually the activity in its entirety is tracking 111,000 under budget. So this is made up of a combination of things within the solid waste activity. As you can see in the detailed explanation further along in the report, the tonnage is down from what we've had this time last year. However, with your tonnage being down, your corresponding expenditure is also down to reflect, because you're obviously not needing to dispose of as much to the landfill. But then I think the most significant thing from my perspective is within Beth's explanation in there, you see that the recycling activity, I think it's a $76,000 saving in the first quarter with that activity being brought back in-house. So I just wanted to highlight that one. And then the other item where we've flagged an exclamation mark is the pensioner housing. So that's discussed in detail in the self-funded section. I have seen a few comms around pensioner housing, so I just wanted to take the opportunity to highlight in a public forum. It is a self-funded activity. Ratepayers do not contribute to this activity. So I just really wanted to put that out there. With the pensioner housing, we do know that this activity does have an overdrawn reserve. We are not anticipating it being repaid in the financial year. It has been factored into our revenue and our within the last annual plan, long-term plan, and into this annual plan, the repayments. So I just wanted to touch base on that and highlight that one. But otherwise, performance-wise, we're tracking pretty well, as I mentioned. I'll just, if it's okay with you, Your Worship, take any questions around the operating performance.
Absolutely. I did discuss this as I was going through the agenda. I've highlighted a couple of things as we go through for deep dives, and both waste management. Wasn't quite sure whether that'll be fully covered in the 17A, and that won't be necessary, but pensioner housing was the other one I thought would be good.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Thanks, Sarah, for the update. I'll have some more detailed questions around pensioner housing when we get to the self-funded activity, but thanks for the info there. Having a look at the more item 6, the more detailed parts, and this might be through you, Mayor Tracy, to the Chief Executive. There's quite a lot of comments in there talking about a favourable variance due to staff recruitment and carrying vacancies. However, it does say we expect to be on track in quite a lot of those activities by year end. So probably best through you to the Chief Executive of, are there any sort of plans to bank some of those savings? So if we have got some operating savings because we haven't had staff enroll or we haven't been able to recruit staff, is there a plan to try and bank some of those savings and not spend them?
Through Your Worship, probably our honest answer at this stage is probably no plans to back. I think quite often we look at the budget across the whole spectrum, so where there may be overspends in one area, it all gets washed up at the end. And an example for this, some of the resourcing that we are using for the direct debit calculation has come from that savings as well. So we're lucky in a lot of ways that we have been able to carry some vacancies. We'd rather not carry vacancies, to be honest. So in answer, no plans to do that. And generally it does get all washed up by the end of the year because unfortunately there are overspends in other areas just the way it works.
Thank you. And if I can ask a follow-up, thanks, Brian. Yes, probably just needed that from you. Respectfully, though, I do ask that that's part of the consideration of if we can make any savings. But through you, Mayor Tracy, to Sarah, have our overall contractor costs gone up as well? Often when we carry vacancies, we will see a corresponding increase in contractor costs. Have we noticed that?
I would sit within our consultancy line and I would say yes, if I think off the top of my head, there's a couple of activities at the moment. Procurement, we were able to successfully recruit, but there is a a time lag as we're bringing them up to speed, so you do have consultant costs. And at the same time, but then the likes of Three Water as well, we've got a few vacancies in that space, in which case we're having to bring in extra consultants to help us with just that. So yes, there is an over, which is why we probably have made the comment that we anticipate being on par come year end.
No, thank you for that.
It was something that I had noted as well, Sarah, but I do thank you very much for the transparency and sharing that. It's something that we would just like to see, and so that we can monitor that and understand it. But it also helps us understand some of the pressures that are on the team and business as usual as well.
Overall questions through, I don't know if you're going to go
Yeah.
page by page or, I mean, I don't have questions on every page.
Yeah, I'm happy to go page by page, even though we get some, because I've got 2 notes on different pages as well. So page 44. Page 45, which I think is where we start across the square. Page 46. I just had one there, it's listed that emergency management, the New Zealand Lottery Board grant 65,000. I just had in my head that that was 75, is that for the digital trainer?
Through your worship, I would need to confirm with the team. I'm not 100% sure on those details.
And I know we didn't fully spend the Freedom Camping project. Was that planned or was that shortfall? Did we miss something there? It's great that we didn't spend it all, but we're also retaining the money was there. It's just a query.
I will come back to you on that one as well. My apologies.
No, that's fine. Page 47. Page 48. But it was, I was intrigued that the water metering was lower. I think it's but great to see that figure. Page 49. Yeah, Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Chair and Your Worship. I was just looking at item 13. I know that there's a further meeting about this, talking about the unbudgeted lease revenue. I suppose noting that although that's included as our unbudgeted revenue, the intent for that was for that to be domain board funds. So just make that comment.
If you don't mind, through your worship, all domain board revenue does come through our books anyway, and your corresponding expenditure. This funding has been put in its own separate bank account and has been sort of ring-fenced. Just wanting to keep in the loop with that one.
Thank you, Councillor Sutherland.
Oh, thanks, Mayor Tracy. I'm just going to make a quick comment on waste management. I've been a bit involved with the 17A, but there are some, and that'll come to pass in the very near future. But there are some trends regarding use of the transfer station that's in relation to the amount of rubbish that's going through, and that's around some of the commercial transactions. So there has been a drop off in waste to that station, and obviously so there's a drop in income, but there's a drop in costs. But there's quite a good explanation, and I think that'll come through before the next quarter's results anyway. But it's sort of okay from what I've seen so far anyway.
Thanks, Councillor Sutherland.
Mayor Tracy?
Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I was just looking at the waste figure, because we've really got no benchmark. It's been pulled back because we've taken it in-house, but we haven't got a benchmark to market on. So I suppose the 17A is going to take that in hand, but is there any data from the past what it used to be? Because otherwise we can say how good we are all the time, but we don't. It's like winning a race with no one else in it.
I guess when we're looking at the financials, we are comparing it to when it was contracted out. the data from when it was in-house, the last time would have been around that 2014, 2015 mark. So you're getting very old data, but the tonnages would all be reflected, so you would be able to see that. Yeah, I think the 17A review will be some very interesting data and some decisions that we will have to look at around waste throughout the whole district. So I'm looking forward to that. And I guess it's something that I can just talk to the team about, whether everything that I'm looking for will come out in 17A, which I think it will. Otherwise, if whatever's missing, then we'll do a little bit of a deep dive so that we're all on top of waste. It's a cost that's not going down. And so it's a cost that is challenging for our communities to meet as well.
Sure, Mayor Tracy, if I can add to your explanation and answering Councillor Wallace's question on the benchmarking. Solid waste has got, if you look at the funding element, it's funded primarily from two ways: the gate fees, the fees and charges, and targeted rates. The gate fees is where we tend to apply, one of the better with the benchmarks. The intention of the gate fees is that we recover the cost of refuse. So if we did our analysis correct to determine the gate fees, then that function should ease, that is the cost and expenses should even up. Like Sarah mentioned in her explanations, that the revenue is down, but the expenditure is down as well. So that is the benchmarking that we do every year to make sure that we set the gate fees correctly to recover the costs of refuse disposal. So that's the exercise we do every year to make sure we set it correctly. The targeted rates is basically transfer station operations and recycling. Recycling is a cost of us. And I think the team is doing some really good work in finding how we can find efficiencies and ensure that how we manage the recycling. I think 70A, you're absolutely right, 70A will try and flesh out how we could be more efficient in that space in terms of transfer station operations and how we manage our recycling.
Thank you for that. I think it's perfectly timed as we go into the end of cleaning costs. Page 50. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. This is probably a really simple question. It's number 14, housing. It talks about the rates allocation posted for this period. Could you just help me understand what that means, please?
Through you, Worship, really great question. I am the problem child in that space. I'm going to be brutally honest. What happens is we pay, like most people, pay our rates via direct debit. They go into a holding account until we can do the allocation across the entire district. This time we're taking an approach with our facilities team just to make sure that we're allocating the rates to the appropriate activity, because it had been quite some time between us completing that exercise. So we'll get that completed and it will be posted in due course.
Thank you. That helps.
Thanks.
Hopefully before the next, or it should be before the next.
That probably makes that a good deep dive. Page 51.
I will make a comment if that's okay, Your Worship. On 51, it mainly talks about the transportation activity. We have in October return had 2 emergency claims to be approved, and so they'll come through. So you'll see that balance out a bit more in the 6-month report.
Thank you. Page 52. I think the only comment I've got on that page just is around staff vacancies as well. Does anyone else have any? In page 53. Got highlighted around those finance costs. Right, summary of the performance result.
So I wasn't sure if we were going to get the wave 1 results in time for us to get this report done, but yay, we did. This time I've taken the opportunity to provide you the reports. Pew Research and TDC, mainly led by Grace, has changed the survey up a little bit, spiced it up, I guess is a nice way to put it. We now get these really beautiful dashboards, so I've extracted them all for you just to give a bit more information to what you're getting in our service performance report. There are a couple of mandatory measures that I've got showing as need improvement. They relate to, I think I've explained it, they relate to the number of complaints we had. I think you're seeing the effects apply to a weather event that occurred August.
Yeah.
I think it is off the top of my head. So they're sort of showing within there. I do anticipate they'll improve as the year goes on if we don't have an event, but you never know. You never know in our district. The community survey results, they're all there. As a well-loved member of the long-term plan, I was a little bit saddened to see that only 41% of those surveyed knew about it. And I think Grace would be saddened even more by the next statistic that's down there around 13% being aware of the district strategy.
Yeah.
But I'll take any questions if that's all right.
I think whilst we see those, it also gives us great opportunity to increase communication with simple councillors of talking about those things. Councillor Gilmore.
Excuse me, thank you very much, Mayor Tracy. And thanks for the info on this. Probably more of a comment rather than a question, Mayor Tracy. I mean, there has been a bit of work gone in on the sort of slightly refreshed survey. This one now, and it's just making sure that councillors are aware, the survey now has a dynamic basis. So that means if someone goes in, someone won't be asked to offer an opinion on a service that they haven't used. So if it's a sports ground, the first question will be, have you used a sports ground? And then it'll ask someone to offer an opinion on that. I had hoped with that dynamic nature that our results might see a bit of an uptick, but generally I think it's really clear that we still have a fair bit of work to do, and I think actually a lot of that work is around how we communicate, how we educate, and how we make sure that people are aware of the level of service that we provide and what the costs might be for increasing that. I have asked this in quite a few meetings as it's come up, and Sarah, you probably know exactly what I'm going to ask, but the comments are really vital to understanding why people might be scoring it down, because what I don't want us to do is put an extraordinary focus into a particular area if we don't actually know what people are dissatisfied with. So I think that's a really crucial piece of analysis. That's my comment.
Oh, I was just, if you don't mind, I'll just make a comment. I did extract all of the comments, but I haven't had the opportunity to filter or check their own names or anything like that in time to make the agenda. I spoke with Mayor Tracy around this yesterday, and that for the 6-month report, changing the approach to make the extraction of the comments the first thing we do, so we can get it filtered, so that then you're getting all the information coming through. I think the comments are really beneficial. It does change or gives a bit more of an understanding. I think I said to Mayor Tracy yesterday, Joe in the solid waste management activity was quite disheartened by her results for her activity, because she has done a lot of work to try and get it up. But when I was able to review the notes, you can see within it, it's cost, the complaints are around the cost of disposing. And so I think when I was able to give her a bit more information, and would like to share this, and will share this with you as soon as I can, it just gave her a little bit more of a, okay, I am on the right track.
Because if I can just, and I think, Mayor Tracy, that's kind of what I'm looking at for the education piece, because the solid waste is one that jumps straight to mind. I know Councillor Sutherland's mentioned that he's been involved in some of the 17A. We haven't seen any yet as the rest of our group, but it is something that we hear a lot. Speaking for myself, the dump fees are too high, the dump fees are too high, and I get it because I agree. However, when you explain to them that doesn't fully cover the costs, and we can reduce the dump fees, but that would have a rating impact, people change their view quite quickly. When people know that you've got to pay one way or another because there's a cost, and some of these things could be real opportunities for us to go out on social media, use any of our other advertising medium and directly explain it. So thank you for that. That's really
I apologise, like I said, we'll pivot the way it's done moving forward.
awesome.
And
Good to
we'll
hear.
circulate as soon as I can.
I think the agenda managers will provide us with a wealth of opportunity, but actually we are going to, we have so many new residents moving in that have come from other towns and places, that actually it's going to be a consistent messaging to keep making sure that it gets across different towns, different regions, provide different levels of service and different costs. Awesome. Thank you, look forward to that. Just one note, and I guess, in regards to the stormwater and not meeting those mandatory measures, I think I've made the note that it's probably only 1 event away, before we'll reach that. And what would be quite handy, I guess, for us, if you don't meet that measure, but is there any way that we're noting the town as well, because that way we can look at directed to the event. Right, page 55 and page 56.
Perfect. I'll move into capital expenditure. Mike has given quite a good report. He's given me a bit of an update. His numbers there, he has said as of October, but that's as of 30th of September. He's put the numbers in October, but that's in accountant speak, that's our 30th of the September period. So just wanted to make sure we had that all in a row. We've spent 12.658 million of the 56 million. He has given a breakdown of where the budget has come from, what makes it up. So as he's mentioned, you have a couple of really large projects in that 56 million, 20 being Suckling Gabriel recovery for the roading team. Paitoa, this budget, as you'll recall from the long-term plan, is the budget that is the Bush Aquatic Community Trust portion, because our portion of the 2.5 is in year 2. That I understand is progressing, and then we've got the Danbury Implement Supply, which I'm sure he has circulated, or the infrastructure he's report around the Implement Supply included within the infrastructure committee. He did do a quick calculation, and I can't recall what page it's on, but I think he has said that it's sitting around 22, there it is, 22.5% of the portfolio budget is spent. He's pretty excited, if I'm honest, when he talks about it, just to see where we've sort of, I think figure 6 actually shows all the projects are sort of in motion, and how far we've come from when he probably started in his role to where we are now is pretty exciting. I don't have too much more to say, so right with you, Your Worship, I'm open to questions and I'll try my best.
Anyone have any further question? I have just clarified with the chief executive around the Carnegie Hall and some of those projects that we see those in time. Like Jason Bill's here.
Treasury, again, this is Beth's baby, so I will do my best. What we could see here is on the dashboard, our finance costs are tracking slightly higher than budgeted, but you'll recall from earlier on, we do have finance revenue that offsets these costs. So I think when you get to the next page, you'll see in the table breakdown that we have some pre-funded debt, which is sitting in term deposit, which is giving us quite good interest rates at the moment. Our total external debt, the way we calculate the year-to-date budget is taking the year end and dividing by 4. It's rocket science behind it, but we are tracking favourably if you want to look at it that way. We will probably look to go out to do some borrowing in the new financial year, just to make sure that we're sort of on par. Our cash position is tracking slightly less, but that's because we've not done any borrowings effectively. The achieved interest rate down the bottom there is showing at 6.33. Beth doesn't She thinks that includes her derivative reversal. So you'll recall at the end of the financial year, we have to do a book entry for our derivatives to show them in our accounts at fair value. She thinks that might be skewing it, but we didn't have capacity or time to get that with our auditors on site at the moment, so I apologise. So we might see that change in the 6-month mark. I just wanted to highlight that. And then she's given a full breakdown of core debt, pre-funded debt, and she has talked about the interest rate there. Any questions?
Yeah, councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Just start on page 62, if that's okay, and looking at the interest cost performance. So thanks for giving it a bit more info because it jumped out at me that the rate had stayed the same. That obviously, looking at our cost performance versus our achieved or our budgeted versus our achieved, goes to now. How's it looking from here in forecasting? And what I mean by that is if we go from here for the next 6 months, is our forecasted interest rate substantially lower? Because obviously that's going to have quite an impact on our financing costs.
As I mentioned through Your Worship, we're in the annual plan behind the scenes. One of the things that I've looked at this week was the projected interest rates within our, I think I've shared with you before, our treasury tool, our online BI tool, and the interest rates within that are showing less than what we had for the long-term plan. Not much less, but still less. We met with our treasury experts, I think it was this week, and they were saying the impact of the US market is showing that our interest rates haven't come down, they've sort of stayed or are moving higher. There's just that little uneasy period is the way he described it, but they're anticipating, I think he said they're anticipating decreases in the next 6 months, but because they are our advisors, we are on the side of caution as opposed to the optimist side of things. I'm not sure if that's answered your question.
Yeah, sort of. And maybe just to simplify what Tracy said, yeah, sort of. So to understand that there's a bit of work to do. I am quite curious, obviously interest rates are a bit of a crystal ball activity to see if any of that work has been done, but if it's in train, I look forward to seeing it. One, I guess, personal request when we're looking at this is more that we take a conservative view as to what the interest rates might be. So looking over this last 12-month period, the variance between the budgeted and achieved, and I understand why, it's not a criticism of anyone, it was quite a high variance between the two, is making sure that we do take a conservative approach to it to see if we can try and get those lines to meet up or overperform the expectations rather than.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for raising that, councillor Gilmore. I have written down the rest of the year. So, councillor Wright.
Yeah, through you there, Tracy. Just a comment. Thanks, Stewart, for that. Really appreciate it. I was really quite surprised at 6.33 as well. Yeah, so that was just a way higher than I thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. Really good discussion. Yeah, I think you touched on it. Interest rates, managing it is like a football. And I think the strategies that Beth and Sarah has put in place in PwC, and I think that's our focus in every catch-up meeting, the pre-funding. If we anticipate that the interest rates are going to go up, and we anticipate through the forecast that we're going to spend another $6 million to cover development, we're thinking about pre-funding now, lock in the lower interest rates now and do the pre-funding, and that's why the element of pre-funding kicks in. We're also actively looking at what we call the derivatives, the blending and extending. So I think the active management allows us to actually try and forecast as much as we can using PwC as an expert to say where the interest rates are going to go and try and hedge. We are quite conservative in that space too, because we want to make sure that we don't overhedge, because if it turns against you, then you get what you call cost. So we're managing it. So that's the active discussion that we're having. And I think the work that Mike is doing in that space is giving us a lot of confidence, because what Mike is doing is able to forecast for us with a high level of confidence what the capital spend is going to be. That is helping us give some assurance about how we should be hedging our interest rates costs. And I think working together with them in that space, and I think the more confidence we have in the forecast, I think then our strategies we are confident in putting the strategies in place. Because if we miss the mark, over hedge or the under hedge, then that's where we expose ourselves to.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy, and thanks for that. It's really helpful. And I suppose this is either to Sarah, to yourself. Is that perhaps the reason why our effective interest rate is higher than what we were anticipating, because we had overhedged and to an interest rate reduction?
Through your worship, I'm going to probably take a little bit of this. We're in this, within our treasury policy, we have compliance levels around when and how long our debt can be hedged for. And at the moment, we're finding that we're reaching our peak compliance for our shorter term, and we need to be taking out the longer term, which is where we are seeing the more favourable rates. However, would it be prudent for us to hedge longer term when a significant amount of our debt is through waters related? And so we kind of are in that hedge a little, but don't hedge too much at the moment until we have more certainty around Three Waters and what we're going to be doing in that space. That's the topic every month. Where are we going? We need to start looking at this longer term hedging. So I think the next conversation in the finance and the management report around the credit rating will probably help me with what I'm able to feed back to our treasury experts as well. So I just wanted to, we do need to be thinking longer term, but we don't want to be taking out longer term debt if we're not going to be retaining that debt. So it's just to kind of put that out there as well. Raj, did you have anything?
Thanks for that. Yeah, that was really helpful and good for us to keep at the forefront of our minds as we actually get the local work done well conversations and both some of our questions. Thanks for this. Sarah, I don't know whether now's the appropriate time, but I don't know. All right. Oh, Councillor Sutherland, apologise.
Oh, it's okay. I've got to face this hiding way here out of Paitoa, Tracy. I was just interested in the discussion, and I take Councillor Mike and Scott's views on the interest rate, which probably caught us by surprise. But I just really want to make a comment, and I often read PwC's Treasury paper with interest, and when you do read it, I'm usually groggy as anything at the end of it, but it always seems to be giving us a lot of comfort, which doesn't always end up being the reality going forward. And it's just a comment, and it's probably a bit of a layman's comment, but just really interested reading this economic analysis looking forward. Doesn't really give me a lot of comfort about where the 6.3 might be. You might assume with their forecast that it should be a bit less, but you really need to be highly qualified to try and get any sense out of that. Just a comment, really.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sutherland. Thank you, Your Worship. You just reminded me around our wonderful Treasury Experts report on page 69. I'm going to draw your attention to it. So when they factor in what they think, the tool calculates what our interest rate is and how we're sort of tracking. It takes into account our term deposits that we have on hand for pre-funded debt, which is what you're seeing out here on the bottom picture, the interest rate management. The 4.52% is what they're saying our average interest costs are. So I just really wanted to highlight the 6.33 does include your derivatives, which is your off-book. It's not a financial transaction. It's an off-book fair value adjustment, which I think is distorting it, which hopefully come our 6-month report, we're able to give you a bit more confidence, a bit more comfort, maybe. Comfort's probably the better word. But that 4.52% on page 69 gives me comfort at night.
Thanks, Sarah. Is that helpful, councillor Sutherland?
Yeah, I had been looking at that same graph, thanks, Sarah, and I was just trying to get some relativity between that and the 6.3 going forward. But no, thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
Your worship, you're going to ask.
Look, it was just in regards, there was a little bit of commentary around our debt increasing by, and sorry, I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but it was something like 470%. I just wondered if, do you want to make a comment on that? Because, when I looked at it, I just sort of thought, well, that's a huge statement, and where's that come from? So, you
Yes, thank you, worship. I would love to address that because it did get brought to my attention by my wonderful husband. Thank you. I think the post says that council's debt since 2015 has increased by 476%. I went back since 2015. I'm not sure if I said that. I went back to a 2015 annual report last night because I just wanted to address it, and I've gone to our 2024 numbers. And it's actually an increase of 560%. Now, it sounds really rough when you hear that percentage, and I understand. However, the context behind it, can I just give you some other numbers? Because they give me comfort. In 2015, our borrowings were only 10,482,000. We've increased to 69 million. Which is an increase of 59 million if we round it. Your fixed assets have increased in that same time period by 302 million. So for an extra 58 million in debt, you've got an extra 300 million worth of assets on your books. I also wanted to just highlight the rates revenue had only increased in that period, or has increased in that period, I shouldn't say only, by 14 million. So out of that 65 million, you've got $302 million worth of assets, which is where I think you need to look at the numbers and take into account what does our debt buy us as a council. It pays for our assets, it pays for our renewals. And we're not telling that picture, we're just looking at the debt. So I just really wanted to give a bit more context. Yes, you don't buy a home without a mortgage. Well, I don't. I'm not sure about everyone else, but most people don't buy a home without a mortgage. We don't buy assets without a mortgage.
Yeah. And there's also intergenerational debt as well. I just wonder whether that's a bit of an opportunity, whether we do something around that to help, it comes back to actually helping people understand. And it is tough when you're watching your rates go up and not seeing all of that, and especially when you compete in one town and some of our assets, they're not visible.
Most of our assets are visible. Yeah. Chunk of them are.
Thank you. That was helpful, and sorry to that last time.
No, like I said, my wonderful husband was pushing buttons, so I needed to do the numbers. Not that people listen to the numbers, but I did have to. Yeah.
Thanks, Mary. Right. There's no more questions. That moves on to the details report.
Right,
Right, that one. Thanks, Raj.
Have a breather.
Thank you, Your Worship. A quick update here, and a bit of context to this. This is an area, I think, given the current issues that we have, we are going to review and revisit and change a fair bit in this area, not just in the reporting, but underlying systems, processes, and how we managing data going forward. That's why I have a section there for improvements. That's coming. So just an update to see where we are in terms of the arrears, the table. I pulled this table apart from the other tables that we historically report. I felt sometimes too much information can be a bit confusing. And I thought this table itself, to me, one table that summarizes quite clearly, I guess, the overall debtors balance at end. It also shows the range. The range is quite important for us. We look at that as well. Going forward, as part of systems improvement, we look to see how we can improve the level of reporting that we have, so provide some comfort to the self-interest and the councillors about how we're managing the debtors. Progress updates in terms of what we've done. The key thing for us is that where we are progressing on what we call addressing debtors, long-standing debtors, including through what we call the mortgage demands rating sales. And I think if you're looking at 10.2.5, one of the outcomes of us going through rating sales process is that 4 properties have settled. And I think we've got a few other properties going through the process. It's a quite a process going through the rating sale. And we are now progressing that when we find that that is the last option for us in terms of pursuing that. And more often than not, we find that people do settle once we go through the various stages of the process rather than at the end doing an actual rating sale. We have engaged, taken the opportunity with the change in resource to engage very closely with DMC. We used to use DMC just to manage our rating sales and follow demand management, mortgage demands, but we have now engaged them wholly to manage debtors. They have got good systems and processes. This is the area of expertise. So had a good catch up with DMC staff like Marty and Amy, and working with them not just to progress where we've fallen behind, but also using their expertise in introducing, I guess, systems and processes and how we could manage this process better going forward. So, any questions?
Can I just ask, in these figures, are the direct debits that haven't been kept up to date included in these numbers?
True, Tracy. This was asked at the last meeting, and I went back and confirmed that yes, whenever we have reported on the debtors balance, they have always included the direct debit errors. So the total amount that we say debtors owing is included.
Councillor Gilman.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Thanks for the update. I wish you going forward. With respect, I was quite disappointed to see the reduction of reporting come through. So I know that you mentioned the tables and this table in figure 10 being a good summary. It is substantially less information to what we've been reported in the past. So I've sort of gone back through the last couple of reports, and there was a huge number of tables. Now, really grateful when you're saying that you're looking at overall reporting, because even with all of those tables, that sort of didn't give us an opportunity to capture the direct debit issue. So clearly we need some work on it. But some of the stuff that I am always particularly interested to look at in the data reports is looking at some of the trend data, particularly in light of the rate increases that we've had. So actually going through, and some of those tables gave a really, really strong picture of what is actually happening, broken down by towns as well. So we could see that. I personally, I think when we're looking at this part of our financial reporting in light of the issues that we've had with direct debits, I do not think this is the time to be reducing reporting in this area. That's my opinion. I do think that we do need to strengthen it to make sure that we are capturing everything. But I've kind of taken a bit of a snapshot of what we were reported before. The summaries of arrear balance, that table which you've given was handy. But then there was some total arrears and collections, and that is going right back to 2019 to 2013. Yeah. There were some really great tables that we had. So I'm not sure if that's something that we can perhaps get emailed to us. I'm sure those tables generated anyway, and hopefully don't take a lot of time. But I personally would like to see some of that information.
Is that possible to email those out large? And I guess, you know, what there is, like, there are tables that we consistently monitor, and I know that the number of rates rebates was something that I monitored just to keep a track of, you know, the economic climate within, you know, within towns and communities. So that would be great. And I know as the review comes through, some that will come through in as improvements as well. Yeah. So, and like you, thank you, Councillor Gilmore. I've reflected back and, you know, thought about, you know, what was there, what could, you know, what could I have missed, what, you know, what.
Spent a lot of time.
So I totally understand that. I'm sure we've all done it.
True, Worship. You're right. My intention in this report is not to say this is what's going to be going forward. And I think my intention is that going forward, especially in 6 months, you'd see more reporting. But it's good to get feedback from you that the certain elements in the previous report was useful.
Mm-hmm.
So we will factor that in to make sure that we reproduce those reports, we find them useful, and add to the suite of reporting where we feel like we need a little bit more. And I think you're absolutely right. I think I heard a few times through the discussion is the trend analysis. And we started reporting that at the last one. It wasn't my intention to reduce it, just to give you a bit of context. It's not my intention to say that this is how the reporting is going to be, this is the low level. And I think the reason why I've done this is the team's focus the last 3 months has been on addressing some key issues and catching up with it. So I just felt that indicate to yourselves that there is a fair bit of work that we want to do in this space. And in the 6 months, you would see, I guess, the reports that you prefer to see or you think is useful, but you want to also add to that, not just more tables of reports, but I guess let's talk a little bit about what we've changed in system processes as well. Like, for example, I've been working with DMC, we've got some standard reports that they do. So we're looking to work with them and say, can you start producing this report for us as well? So as part of working with DMC, we're going to have a suite of reporting that we're going to use and work with them. So those are the things we can replicate in our report. Because the other reports, a fair bit is trend analysis and not granular reporting that we're going to do and how we're going to manage it. So definitely you would see more information in this space. And one of the sections would actually be reporting against the issue, which is direct debits, how we're progressing against those, how we're managing, and rates postponement, how is that tracking, and show a little bit of stats on that as part of it.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Thanks for the explanation. There's just a couple of quick questions on that because it sounds encouraging, changing the reporting up and knowing what councils might want to see. Two quick questions with this. Will that new reporting be available in the next, is your intention to bring that new level of reporting to the next meeting when we have one of these updates?
Yes, the 6 months, we would like to introduce a little bit more of those reporting. And then through that process, gather more feedback. We find that, oh, you hit the mark right, not quite right, can I have a little bit more? Then hopefully we start refining it and then we land on the suite of reports that I think would be, but that's my intention in the 6 months to produce more reports, tables, trend analysis.
And Worship, just a really quick follow-up. With that in mind, can I respectfully request that the information that we've had since I've been on council when it comes to the debtors report is still included in there until we actually agree what this report should look like. So instead of removing any information at this point, because for me, I'm very big at looking at things. So, you know, I like to know how we're tracking, particularly in light of, you know, double-digit rate increases, what impact that's having. So if we are going to do a new report, if anything's taken out, if we can still have the old report and then agree what that might look like, because I don't want us to to get to the point where we're sitting there reading the report and not having the information.
Thank you. Councillor Sutherland?
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Yeah, I've just listened to that discussion with interest. I have mentioned rates a fair bit over the last year or so about this report, and I have been critical of it really, and I felt there's so much information that wasn't of value. I respect to Scott. I do appreciate that now the direct debit situation has come along. It's changed our view about this area a little bit, but I take Raj's point. The information we need needs to be very relevant. But over the years, my view is we've had a lot of information and a lot of work's gone into this area. But I just want to make the comment again that I did last meeting, and that when I looked at many councils' financial reports, both 6 monthly and 12 monthly, and nowhere did I find anything anywhere near the information that we provided for rates. And I'm sure there is somewhere. I'm just not saying we shouldn't do it, but let's do what we need right. But I could not find it. And I looked at a lot, and I'd be interested to try and find something, but I haven't been able to. So I would think the Tauranga district has probably put more investment into this area than any council I could find. Just a comment, but if we're going to do it, let's do it right, and let's get the information that's valuable, really. That's all I'd say about that.
Thanks, Councillor Sutherland. I think probably, maybe if we have a session, even as part of, have a look at the review, work with audit and risk and have agreed what we're going to get. So, Raj and the team are not providing information that we don't want. And had a good look at it. The timing's right for that. So thank you for looking at what other councils do as well. Councillor Franklin.
Thank you, Your Worship. And this might be a really dumb question, but to Raj, with the direct debit system, and when the ratepayer receives their invoice, it says quite clearly on there something along the lines of you don't need to do anything because you pay by direct debit. If by chance something untoward happened, maybe where a direct debit bounced because there wasn't sufficient funds to pay it, and that person started to fall into arrears, would that trigger on the system to come up in this report? And would you pick that up? I'm just thinking about going into the future, how we prevent anything like that ever happening again. I don't know.
To your worship, so in terms of reporting, it does pick up because what it looks at is balance owing. So if they miss a payment, let's say $50 for that month, when you're looking at payments that they need to collect and balance owing, it'll pick it up. What we are trying to do as part of the process is that a system that we are capturing that they have missed a payment. Partly that's what we tend to do, because as part of the bank rec process, when we see a dishonor, and the intention is that the staff will then have a contact with the ratepayers and say you've missed a payment because insufficient funds in the bank account. So they've got two options. One is they actually pay the difference, or what we tend to do is that retain the direct debits as they are the continuing payments. When they miss a few payments, what we tend to do is we tend to follow up with them and get them to catch up. A process that we're looking at is that we should now turn that into a debtors process, meaning that now we're going to follow up with you because you've not just missed one, we've missed a few payments. So now a different rigor goes into the process and not keep you. The intention of direct debit is that we are in a sense control of the payments. But once they start missing it, then you need to have another layer, which is debtors management. Then you then asking them to say, now we need to reset the DD. No longer 54, must be this amount. Or we now have a debtors management process. So I think that's what we need to do. Some of the ratepayers that are see-throughs, but we're learning the process, that some of them actually use payments. But we still keep them on the DD, but either don't adjust the DD, they're falling behind. We don't follow up with them where they have said that they will come in and pay the additional payment to catch up. Or we don't then follow up with the next stage, which is we're going to manage you as a debtor. That's quite different. So that's a process that we'll iron out. And that requires, I guess, not just systems, I guess, the reporting that's coming through and flagging. And that's what we're working with DMC on. And this is what I think DMC did highlight to us to say that when they initially looked at it, you've got quite a few people actually missing DDs, but you're not raising it to us so that we follow up as a data, but you're trying to manage it. And that's how they fall behind, because they miss one, then they miss again, and that process of adjusting the DDs or next stage.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Sorry, Raj, just for clarification, because I may have misunderstood what you were saying. If someone's paying by direct debit and misses a payment on direct debit, do we, until they've missed a few payments, do we not do anything with that because they're on a direct debit? So you're talking about moving them to more of the debtors management. So let's say if I miss my fortnightly payment, however I've set up my direct debit, will my next payment in the next fortnight pick up that arrears balance, or does it just sit there in arrears and they? So if that is the, so am I right in my understanding? So if that is the case, why on earth have we not had this running through a debtors management process this whole time? Because that person would constantly be in arrears and we're in control, we've got the direct debit. So why haven't we collected the money when we've been able to?
Your worship, you're talking about not the majority, you're talking about a few people who have missed the payments. So what happens is, you're right, let's say on weekly payments, I missed this week, this one, not enough cash. Then the next payment will be deducted, but you've missed one installment.
Yeah, so you're in arrears.
Straight away. So the intention for us, as some of the memos we did, is we contact ratepayers and says that now we need to pay us $50. So then you walk into the council, pay it online or adjust it. Most of them do, some of them don't. Then they miss the next payment, the conversion takes place. So the process that we're looking at is what's the trigger for us to move away from this direct debit arrangement to now a debtors management arrangement. Just quite different debtors management.
So we're following.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. So the moment it is honor, our process is that we give a call, issue a letter to say you dishonor the payments. Some of them are good, they make up the payment. Some of them do fall behind. And I think the rigor that we're going to try to introduce in the process is that don't keep them in the DD process, which is people who are really good in the DD, they consistently pay. You put them into a debtors management process slightly.
Sorry, through your worship. So just further to what Raj was saying, it's something I've looked into as well. I've noticed there has been contact made with anyone that's missed an automatic payment or a direct debit. But I think where we need to move to was a consistency in that approach to ensure it's happening all the time and the relevant follow-ups are made as well. So as part of the review, a lot of these things have been highlighted.
That makes sense.
And I think I found Councillor Peter Weber shared, the direct debit within the gym, understanding that it takes 30 days to change a direct debit, but an active program with, that can walk in and do it, but it doesn't have a little bit time. Councillor
I just had an interesting situation myself with the Horizons rates. We sold our section up on the top after we'd sold our house and land. And when I programmed the payment for our Horizons rates at 106, I hit the wrong reference button and it went to that section. Next thing I get this shooty letter from Horizon saying I haven't paid the rates. I'm like, yes, I did. But it was a phone call and it was sort of just like that. So yeah, but that was just a mistake. But it only alerted me because I was confused of not paying it. So.
Councillor Peter Weber.
Sorry, could I just ask that going through debt management central, are we paid so we pay them as a percentage of how much they, or is it a contract and it doesn't matter how many people we put through there? How's that work?
Good question. If I recall, I've got to confirm this. there's two sort of layers to the payments. Because less, Brian can tell me, because of less, we have an agreement with them to say that there is what we call sort of like a fixed fee that they pay for managing our debtors. And then there is a little bit of what we call a fee for recovery. And the fee for recovery is only if they recover. So it's not a fee that we pass on. So there is a minimum that we pay because as part of LESS, we are part of them. What the LESS DMC is looking at is because they have brought on board a lot more other councils, that fixed charge is going to reduce so that we are only paying based on what we call a commission sort of. So where they have been successful in recovering, that portion is where we pay commission.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, and I think through workshop, it's sort of like when something goes to Bay Corp or anything like that, there's a penalty element to it, and that's where they seem to make, because the client receives all their money, but there's an element of, so it might be slightly different at what stage it gets to that, but I know there's generally a penalty once it goes to a debt collector, and that's what they get. I think they get that as part of the process. We can clarify 100% for sure though, but it should be cost neutral for us because they're collecting funds, but there's another element to it.
Thank you. Right, self-funded activity.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just before we get on to those, I wonder, I've been able to reach out to Max while we were chatting dealers, and I have answers to your questions earlier around the external funding. So the Freedom campaign, the return of funds, we received the funds and it had a limited time in which we were able to spend them. That was for the campaign ambassador for a 2-year period.
Yeah.
We only had the campaign ambassador role for one of those 2-year periods, so that's the return of the funds. The second question was around the 65,000 and whether it was the trailer. Max has confirmed to me that the $65,000 relates to unspent lottery funding as at the 30th of June, which we've carried forward, which we're required to do for accounting purposes with our audit friends. Generated is for the generators, FTS cell phone tower, social recovery and grant funding. So just close that loop. Got the information for you. Thank you, technology, and thank you to Max. Self-funding activity, forestry. Raj, I wondered if you wanted to say this one.
You could say something.
Forestry. So very good news. Very good news. So got an update on Wednesday last week. Confirmation that the OIA consent has been granted. The agreement is now unconditional, with a proposed settlement date of 10th December.
Merry Christmas.
So great outcome for us. It has been a really good experience in working with the purchaser Inca. So that's a huge milestone for us. I was talking to Mayor Tracy, and one of the things we want to do is first is working with Inca in a slightly different way. Is we have a major investment coming in the district. We want to see how we message this. So comms is going out regards to the sale. We want to talk a little bit about the positive in our decision that we made with regards to selling Virgin. I also want to explore with Representative Inca how we can connect them to both our EU partners. And I think it's quite important that we do that, so that and I think they are quite keen, because part of this process we were sharing with them is how we see and how we were managing the forest and how we're working with the Rangitani National Peter Homes in this space. Another positive news is that they would like to continue using Peter Homes as Kaitiaki for the forest. So that was really good. Initially, they were quite nervous as to what his role and what we're trying to do. So we helped them through the process to understand it. And now it's really positive that they're doing that. It's really good. They are quite keen on following through with what we call the broader outcomes, looking at using local suppliers, local contractors in terms of silviculture and harvesting. So I think through this process, we established a really good relationship and we want to leverage on that going forward.
Thanks, Raj. Well done for that. And can I, Councillor Johnson was. Well done. Thank you, Sarah.
Pension and housing, I won't chat too much because I'm anticipating the questions thanks to the heads up earlier. Operating performance, so as you can see in here, it's currently got an operating surplus of 118,000 when we had budgeted a deficit for this period of 25. But as the comment later shows, we do have 124,000 worth of rates that we've budgeted which haven't yet been posted. That would still leave us tracking better than what we budgeted if we were to factor that in. Not quite $25,000 deficit for the period, but still a slight deficit. And then we've got the capital expenditure there for the quarter where we've given a bit of an explanation around one of the flats with the first water pipe and a refurbishment work took place. And then we've included for you the reserve balance at 30 September.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? I've got a big note, discuss accounts and Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Petra. Yeah, I don't have a huge amount of questions. I think it's more about future reporting for this activity is something I'm really keen to see. Noting that the reserves overdrawn by almost 310,000. This is something we had quite a lot of discussions about. We were looking at the rental and certainly the desire from us all that this absolutely had to be a self-funding activity. I did a bit of I like looking back at this. So I went back and had a bit of a look at where the overdrawn balance has been at. And it does seem kind of all over the place a little bit, like it's sort of going up and down like crazy. So I think in 31st December, it was like 61 grand, estimated to go to 200 by the end of the year. So we're getting towards the end of the year, we're almost at 308, but the last time it was reported, it was at 400. So we've seen that. So it's kind of going like that. What I would be really keen to see is actually those trends on a chart. So we go, this is where we were, this is where we are, and be able to have some narrative because there's obviously reasons about it. This is an area, and I was going to make similar comment about forestry. I won't now because we've got no conditioning. But, you know, as an example, in December of last year, that had a reserve balance of 715,000. That's now gone to 418. We need to really be able to do our job in monitoring, particularly these self-funded activities. So I think that would reduce the number of questions that would come through, but it would certainly give me some more.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that suggestion. It's a really easy thing for us to chuck in. A simple line graph will sort of show you in a trend over a few years. Definitely something we can factor into reporting report.
And then if we could, sorry, Tracy, we could have that and we could almost just build the narrative. So this was the narrative, like, you know, like if it's nice short comments, so we can actually go, so we don't just see the other pointers, we go, we know why it was
at that point
in that report, and now this is why it's changed, because we had a massive renovation, we had this, we had that. But we may have to look at rents as we go through the annual plan process. I just want to make sure I'm fully on top of what this looks like.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Gilmore. Great suggestions. I guess for me, you know, seeing, I want to have a look at what's the plan. We want to be good landlords financially. You know, look at the CRMs that come. There's quite a few around pensioner housing. What does that look like? And that's why I was sort of quite keen to understand that deep dive. And how much further have we got to ensure that all of those flats meet the healthy homes? Versus, you know, working also at the same time on reducing that amount of reserve that's in deficit. So yeah, that was where I was looking at. I guess we do have to be mindful that we don't put ourselves into that position again. So it's nice to see more full.
I just made a comment about that, if I may. It's quite off track really, but I helped a ratepayer or a resident, I should say, fill out the application form for housing for the elderly, and she took exception to the word elderly because she's just turned 65. And yet we call it pensioner housing on everything else, but we call it housing for the elderly. It's a little bit patronising. That's how it came across to her.
You'll get no argument from me in a conference table before.
Can we get that changed?
Absolutely.
We'll note it and we will
See, I'm not elderly, and I'm 73. Why?
see what we can do.
Spring.
Thank you.
You're a spring moment. You're on the
I'm
stage.
worried about actually.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
I just wonder before we move anywhere else, would you, we adjourn for a cup of tea? For 15 minutes, is that okay?
Yes, sounds good.
We'll come back at 10:45.
Thank you.
10, sorry, two different times.
Yeah,
I was thinking yesterday.
Yeah. Right. How's coffee? Thanks, Sarah. Done well. I sent an email, what's my bad? Okay. Welcome. Okay, Sarah.
Thank you, Worship Management Report. First item on here is our treasury, my favourite, our borrowing and Hebrew. You'll see within the table, I might do a little bit of an explanation if you don't mind. Within our table, I have updated the limits, council's limits to reflect the change within our 24-34 long-term plan that we adopted. But the table below that talks about our maximum limits and our maximum available borrowing, I just wanted to say that the figures as at 30 June 24 and annual plan from 23-24 are at our old limits. I haven't restated again what the new limits were because it's not what they were. But as at 30 September, we've got what our borrowing limits would be based on the numbers that we have within the 30 September period. I've given us what our full year one budget looks like with our headroom. And then I've also given what our year one would look like with 80% worth of CapEx completed. Is there any questions on the headroom tables or the headroom piece before we delve into the next item? Next item, this is a really nice juicy piece, and this is something I'm looking forward to working on. Number 4 is the credit rating process. So Your Worship asked us to give a bit more information around what the credit rating process would look like, what information we have at the moment, just to take us all on the journey, I guess, around what the future will look like. Tracy's asked for this to retain as a standing item on our agenda, so don't be surprised if you get little bits and bobs every quarter. So we've been spending quite a bit of time with our treasury advisors, and we were doing this as part of the long-term plan process as well, just getting an understanding around what it would mean for us, what it would look like. In section 4.2, we have said around becoming a credit rating agency gives us a twofold benefit. I'm going to say benefit because Councillor Wars isn't here to correct me, but benefit which allows us to have the higher debt borrowing limits up to 280%. However, it's a limit, it's not something we're striving to. I just really wanted to communicate that. But the other benefit is if we were to be successful in receiving an AA- rating, there is a 15 basis points per annum savings and interest costs, which would be beneficial to us as our debt levels are projected to become quite significantly more throughout the long-term plan process. I do want to put a caveat on that, and that our long-term plan does include 3 orders. So bearing that in mind as we juggle with our treasury experts around what this sort of looks like. So we've said that there would be an ongoing cost or being a credit rated agency, so that would be, we'd be looking anywhere between $50,000 to $70,000 per month per annum every year once we do obtain that rating. And then the process that we've talked to our experts around, I've listed out, they've suggested a 3-stage process. Each stage we can do in isolation, we can do it all at once, and it's broken down, they've given us the cost per each sort of stage. What I have put on the next page, I think it's page 142, that the estimated cost for the 3-stage process just with our experts would be anywhere between $20,000 to $30,000. So we were factoring this in to begin this work in year 2, year 3 of our long-term plan, so that when we were hitting those peak debt levels in years 4 and 5, we were had the availability of the borrowing room should we need it in those during that time. So I guess what I'm probably seeking from you today is, with the potential change with 3 waters and what that's sort of looking like, do we want to begin this process in year 2? As we're beginning the annual planning process, is it, I think it would be beneficial for us to get more of an understanding from our experts and to understand what our rating might be, because that's probably the biggest do you, don't you proceed item. But yeah, keen to discuss if that's okay.
Thank you, councillor McDonald.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy, and thanks for all that information, Sarah. I have a few questions, if that's okay. First of all, when we were having a look, there's in the reports, 4.2, it talks about the potential for 15 basis point per annum reduction in debt, which is pretty attractive. So I suppose my first question though is there any risk at all that we might get an unfavourable rating, which would negate that cost and leave us stuck with an ongoing, $50,000 to $70,000 a year?
Through your worship, yes, there is a risk. When you've asked that question, hindsight should included in this report. LGFA borrowers that we borrowed through, they provided us a table recently when they came on site and met with us, and it's listed all the credit rated councils and what their rates were. So I think it'd be a really handy piece if I circulate that. But most, I think, in that table, if I recall correctly, I think the worst case scenario on here is 8A minus. But until we've done the work with our treasury experts and they've done the shadow exercise, we kind of don't. I would like to think we would be, but I'm prudent and play caution. I'm not an expert in this space.
Thanks. I think that'd be great to circulate because I have seen it and I can't recall where it was more probably within something within local government. And I remember being surprised that they were quite high, so that would be good to understand. Sorry, councillor.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy, and thanks for that. I suppose it was the other big note that I had on there about the other assets likely to move. So considering that that's a lion's share of our debt, if that gets moved, which it will one way or another, gets moved off our books, that 15 basis point reduction likely wouldn't cover the 50 to 70,000. So I did some sort of rough calculations on where we sit now. Clear benefit of 15 basis points. You move the Three Waters assets out, not a clear benefit, but also we don't necessarily need the additional borrowing capacity. So we've got the LGFA being very, very clear that they will find ways to be funding the entity. So it's not, we moved off our books. My concern is, are we going to go through a whole heap of work doing something where we don't need to have the higher amount? Now, I really appreciate your comment that it will be a limit, it's not a target. The problem is every time that we've raised that limit as a council, we have shot through the target and then had to come back and look at it again. So I've always felt really uncomfortable increasing that, regardless from a principal perspective. My view, if you are looking for direction, is pause, see what we're going to be looking at with Three Waters. My take of it now is I don't think that this will be necessary if the Three Waters transition happens as quickly as we can. And I really want to see what the potential benefit will be in the 15 basis point reduction with the non-Three Waters assets. And my calculations, and you could tell me I'm wrong straight away, my calculations is that there would be a negative for that. So it would end up costing us, there'd be no savings at all.
Through your worship, I haven't done the calculations, but my knowledge suggests you're not wrong.
Thank you.
I don't, I think for me it was great to see this process and understand that we've got a lot of conversations with local water done well, and I think not investing too much with a focus and see this focus where our energy and our time goes, and I think it with us until we've got a little bit more information. But in the local water done well, information, I have asked Peter Windsor for some information around strength and overheads, because that's something that we haven't looked at. That is, I am concerned with what that looks like. So we've got a lot of conversations that are in detail to get through. So I have specifically asked for some information around that so that we can understand that in the decision-making process as well. But it's great to see, what the process is. No matter what, there's time.
Yeah.
There's time there. Did Councillor Sutherland or Councillor Wallace, did you have any questions or thoughts on that?
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. I'm pretty much in Scott's camp with this at the moment. Summed it up for me quite well.
Thank you. Okay. There's your direction, Sarah.
Thank you. I thought this would be a longer conversation, if I'm honest, but that's great to get clear direction. Item number 5, we've given an update on the direct debit adjustment project. For information, is there any questions flowing out of that?
Councillor Gilman.
Thank you very much, Mayor Tracy. Just a couple, and thank you for the team that put this together. I think this is.
Thank you for this, it's great. She's done a great job.
So thanks very much, Sandy, for putting this together, because it's quite helpful to see it laid out like this, particularly in 5.2.2, the first bullet point on page 143, which talks about the overall cost that's currently estimated. I suppose, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but that will be a number probably of interest to the community, particularly in light of, and I know we weren't allowed to, but if it had been written off, that would have gone a long way towards writing it off. So my comment, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just want to make sure this is in public, most of that expense, regardless of what option we chose, would have been incurred anyway, because most of that expense would be in the investigation and the research and all of these things that were listed, which would have had to have been done even if there was a write-off. So there might be some slight differences, but the lion's share of that money, regardless of how we decided to tackle it, would have been incurred. Am I right? Is that a correct assumption?
Just going back to that legal advice around the write-off.
Yeah, I think
Not all.
yeah, not all of it. I guess there could have been a reduction in the project management costs, but certainly still would have been legal costs, still would have been incurred costs.
Communication, some of the project management still would have had to have happened.
Yeah, maybe not to the same extent, but certainly would have been. It's hard to estimate, but certainly wouldn't have come for nothing, that's for sure. I think that one of the aspects that is missing from the cost, though, is the huge amount of staff time as well across the organisation that we haven't got a cost of around that, so that would have been potentially less. But I agree with your point that either option would have still incurred costs.
Yeah, thank you. And then that makes it more succinct in my head as well.
Yes.
So thanks. Just my next question, 5.3, which is on page 143, talks about how this project's been funded, and it talks about primarily it's come from a reduction in the staff training budget. So I have 2 quick questions on here, and perhaps this is through to the Chief Executive or through to Sandy. What are the implications of reducing the staff training budget by that amount?
Sorry, was that through to me?
I could answer it if you like, Sandy. You can jump in.
Sure.
After me, I don't cover everything off, but through your worship. So effectively, we had quite significant reductions in training budgets prior to this year. So effectively, we were in catch-up mode anyway, but I guess that moving into this year, there was an increase in those training budgets compared to previous years to try and catch up, but managers have been directed effectively to only do essential training that is required for those roles. So there will be a reduction in the amount of training and courses and conferences. But if I was to be perfectly honest, that reduction is manageable. I think because we did have that, effectively that increase, it just pretty much meant that we maintained that same sort of level as we did through the previous 2 years. When we deliberately really reduced that very low. It would be risky if we continue doing this for much longer, if I was to be honest, but certainly I think staff are aware of the reasons why we're having to do this. So I think it's manageable at this point.
Councillor Golding.
Thanks very much, Tracy. I suppose the reason why that jumped out at me was we did have some discussions around the long-term plan, and we were looking to try and find every savings that we were able to have a rating impact. Staff training was talked about. That it was a bit of a non-negotiable because of the reduction in previous years, and I recall, and I can't remember exactly the words that it was, but I recall that there was commentary around the risks if we continue doing reducing that budget. And so it did jump out at me when I saw it on here of, when I've been trying to get as many reductions as I can. I certainly, as part of my background, I understand the importance of training, so I understood why that is important. But it seemed, there was a bit of fat, we've got it from there. So what I wanted to just be really clear on is what were the implications, because if there are very few, then perhaps it should have been reduced in the NTP.
So through your worship, my response to that was my preference would be massively not to use that budget for this. So obviously this was unplanned, and I had to look across the organisation to say where was somewhere we could actually get the funding to do this. Because if I came cap in hand to council to say we want an additional 150K of unbudgeted expenditure, I don't think I would have had the approval for that. So looking at all the risks that we have from the organisation, that in my mind was one way of achieving it without a constant rate power. And even though we are managing that, my preference would be that we wouldn't be in this position and we would be able to provide that training to staff, to be perfectly honest. So not ideal, but I think it was the right decision to make rather than coming to council for additional expenditure.
Thanks,
Following that, can I just ask within percentages there'll be a best practice? Are we at that best practice for training? Are we below that? You don't have to come and give me that answer now, but just how far are we off that? And if I really back to some organisations that we've dealt with where it was very clear that they didn't make that investment, and it clearly showed that they were investing less than 1%. If I remember rightly, it might be somewhere around 5% for staff. Yeah.
I was going to say, during the RTP process, Sandy, you can probably jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but what we budgeted was significantly less than best practice, just because we were in that trying to transition from the low levels that we were at and moving up to something more reasonable, bearing in mind our rates increases and where they were sort of sitting. Sandy, did you have anything further?
So it kind of varies depending on the type of organisation you have, and there's a number of different ways that you can do it. We've budgeted per person for $1,500. And that is quite common throughout New Zealand to have about that much. We are looking to shift it to being based on a percentage of total salary for next time. But anywhere between 1% and 5% is of the salary budget is pretty normal.
Thanks, Sandy.
Okay, item number 6, role of the auditors. Timely items go on the agenda with our auditors on site at the moment. Most of this information I have pulled from the auditors themselves. Actually, they provided. I think you'll recall, you might not, when our elected members initially came on council, we had our audit director of the time, Debbie Ferreira, come along, and she did a PowerPoint presentation around what their role was. I think it was more LTP specific, if I recall correctly. But from that, I've reached out to the auditors and said, hey, I'm doing this case, and I've redirected me to a couple of different places, to the Office of the Auditor General, and then obviously their website as well. Rather than go through it, is there any questions from it? Is it on par with what we were all thinking? Is it? Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons I wanted this in the agenda is really around the questions that we are getting, and rightfully so, from members of the public around, our books have been audited. We spend a significant amount of money doing so to give that, that trust and credibility in those, and yet we've had this year come through. So many people do want to know, how is this missed? So I think it's a good start to understand what the role of the minister is. So. Yeah, that's included that. Councillor Gilman.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. And definitely appreciate that. That was certainly my understanding. I am still keen, this is probably as an aside, to understand what the auditor's role may have been within the direct debit. Well, was there any opportunities for the auditor to pick it up? It's probably the best way, and to be able to have confidence that no, that's right outside of their scope. I think when I've had a read through what you've covered, it still feels like that could have been in scope, particularly 6.3. So it's, again, not casting any aspersions, but I think that we still need to be able to get that information clearly through the investigation so we can provide that out.
Thanks, Councillor Gilmore, and I guess specifically asked for exactly that from the review. So we will get that.
One way to answer that, or just wait for that.
I did speak to the review around answering that. You're welcome to speak to it.
Three worship.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. Yeah, regarding that, because I think we're all commonly getting the same questions, but I can appreciate where we're all sitting, because I mean, to employ a company to audit everything one does would be financially impossible. But in straight little lines, in straight simple terms going forward is what they want, some assurance. And how we do that, hopefully there's new processes in place and procedures, etc., which the CE has promised us. So yeah, hopefully that will overcome the idea that we're sitting around a table letting these things happen.
Thanks, Councillor Wallace.
So through worship, it was on scope of investigation, and it is a question that has been asked, and not to preempt anything to the release of that, but ideally it sat around the fact that when it comes to the direct debit, we were still receiving payments. So you didn't actually pay, and as it started, it was But while there's low rates increases, it's pretty much unnoticeable, even for staff. As it gets bigger and bigger, it does become a little bit more noticeable, but it is only current debt. It's not in excess of, it's not 6 years debt. It's within that 12-month period because you are still receiving regular payments. So it's, if we didn't receive any payments, then it would be shown because it will be over the years. But what the investigator has highlighted is that because you are getting income coming in and they're not debtors, and it is only for the current year, it was actually probably something that auditors wouldn't, in his view, pick up. In his view.
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and thanks, Brian. This is a question actually to you, Your Worship, having commissioned that report. When can we expect this council to receive that report?
I would say it will be this week, or if not really, but I haven't heard.
So it's
The first draft.
Worship. So, yeah, effectively, the draft's been done with some very minor changes, to be fair, and he's just tidying it up, and then it, probably by the end of the week.
And the audit part of it was one of those changes specifically requested, but I guess for me, audit did, they did highlight, details was on that list, so I'm just, part of this will be like, what else could we have seen? I just was keen for that comment, understanding the public's view, and for ourselves.
Thanks, Your Worship.
Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you, Worship. Just harking back to the debtors report again, sorry. So those balances, so we're pretty aware that 90% of these people who were caught up in the direct debit debacle will have opted for putting that on their house, so that will obviously be repaid when the house sells or when they pass away and it becomes part of their estate. So those figures will still sit in that debtors report at that time. It's quite hard to read at the future debtors report, not think of that in the process, if you know what I mean.
But it will be highlighted, have to be reported.
Yeah, it have to be sort of like almost a separate line saying these are those.
The management that does full value for some years.
Through Your Worship, you're absolutely right. That's why I mentioned that we need to look at the reporting in light of this as well, because we need to put that separate, because including as part of this management, we are managing them differently.
Yes.
Because it's postponed.
Yes.
Yeah, so we need to make sure that we
So they're not
separate them.
accumulating interest either.
Yeah, correct.
So perhaps just a suggestion, if it could be a subtotal and then there's a separate item making the full total, perhaps would make it stand out.
We will go through the process and how what's the intent for reporting this separately, and what else do we need to report in this? For example, you want to show how many of them actually come off postponement, and some of them did indicate that even though they want to postpone their rates, at some stage when they change their mind, they may choose to repay. So those are the things that I think we need to think about, how we're going to report that section of that element of rates, which is postponed.
Thank you.
Can I just make a comment? We all have the ability, well, not me, you have the ability within your internal audit program to set internal audits. So I understand that will be happening as part of the audit and risk committee at some point in time. So maybe, I know we made the comment around it, we can't audit everything, but maybe think about those things that you would like audited, because that could be factored into that program and that's something coming up.
So I think that there will be recommendations that will come from both the reviewer and the chair. Sure that we picked up.
I have one more item, if you don't mind, Your Worship. It's not on the agenda. I just thought I would take the opportunity to give you all an update around our audit for the 24 annual report. As you're aware, we've had our auditors on site going through the 24 annual report. This is probably the best position we as a council have been in for the annual report, and we're really reaping those benefits by the audit and what's sort of coming out of the audit and the process that they've sort of gone through. So they are finalising the work on site today. They are going through their final review rest of this week and next week. And we're on track for our draft opinion for our audit and risk early December and adoption at 18th. So just thought I'd give you a quick update.
That's good.
Okay. It's fantastic. Right. Okay, with that, can I have somebody move the management report being received? Thank you, Councillor Chase, seconded Councillor Franklin, who was in favour, please say aye. Thanks, carried. Thank you, Jerry. And if I could just go back to the first quarter performance report and just check nobody had any further questions around, I just wanted to make a comment, I really did enjoy the bar graphs and they could really have a look and just some of the comments versus some of the graphs and seeing those percentages where they didn't align. So when we get those comments and we're able to see and dig down into that a little bit further, I'd be quite keen to do that. And some of them didn't align for me, stuff like animal control and some of those bits as well. But I think I did have any question with that.
Thanks. You wish it, no question, or just a comment? Similar to what I made before was referenced. It is clear we have a lot of work to do as a team. There's definitely some opportunities for us to be focusing on things that are important to so this has been quite a big focus. I know there's been a lot of work. I've been involved in a small amount of it. A lot of work that's gone into this first stage, making it those questions dynamic. It gives me a lot more confidence that it's not being skewed, but it hasn't improved the result as perhaps we would have hoped. So a lot of work to do. I'm very committed to, once we've got some of that information, to spending the time and to see if we can come up with some suggestions on improving.
Absolutely, thank you. And Grace has done a great job. Can I just have somebody move that we received the first quarter performance report for the period end of the September 2024? Moved Councillor Gilmore, seconded Councillor Peter Weber. All those in favour, please say aye. And that brings us to the close of our meeting. Thank you very, very much. For that today, it's been some good discussion and really looking forward to local board done well. Implementation on finance. There's some big issues, so that'll be the next part. I will close us off with our whakataiki to our district. Let the winds of the Rohini and Tauranga give you strength. Let the waters of the Manawatu nourish you. For we are the Pona of Te Tāpiri Nui o Whānau.
Jerry,